Chapter 27. And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus's band. And entering into a ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning to sail by the coast of Asia, one Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. And the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul, and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself. And when we had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea to Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria, sailing unto Italy, and he put us therein. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce we come over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete over against Salmone, and hardly passing it came unto a place that is called the Fair Havens. Nigh thereunto was the city of Lasea. Now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them, and said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the lading and ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might obtain to Phenice, and there to winter, which is an haven of Crete, and lieth toward the southwest and northwest. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing they had obtained their purpose, loosing thence they sailed close by Crete. But not long after there arose against it a tempestuous wind, called Euroslydon. And when the ship was caught, and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. And running under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat, which when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, strake sail, and so were driven. And we being exceedingly tossed with a tempest the next day, they lightened the ship. And the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. But after long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them, and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I would exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me last night the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, that it shall be even as it was told thee. Howbeit we must be cast upon a certain island. But when the 14th night was come, as we were driven up and down in Adria, about midnight the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country, and sounded, and found 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they sounded again, and found it 15 fathoms. Then, fearing lest they should have fallen upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern, and wished for the day. And as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea, under color as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, Except these abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat, and let her fall off. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying, This day is the 14th day that ye have tarried and continued fasting, having taken nothing. Wherefore I pray you to take some meat, for this is for your health. For there shall not an hair fall from your head of any of you. And when he had thus spoken, he took bread, and gave thanks to God in presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then were they all of good cheer, and they also took some wheat, and were all in the ship 260 souls. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, and cast out the wheat into the sea. And when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust the ship. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves unto the sea, and loosed the rudder bands, and hoised up the mainsail to the wind, and made toward shore. And falling into a place where two seas meet, they ran the ship aground, and the forepart struck fast, and remained immovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. And the soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim out and escape. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. And the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. This was a huge trip for Paul to take. He had to go to see the court of Caesar, and they left from Caesarea or Sidon, and they went north around Cyprus, between the coasts of Cyprus and Turkey, followed along the Turkish coast until they got to the very furthest southwest corner, a city called Myra, and then got in a big ship from Alexandria. Now, the ships from Alexandria were known for they were carrying the grain, usually, that was grown in Egypt and went to Rome. And so they're on that ship. And then the people that owned that ship decided that instead of going along the coast, the Greek coast, and then across to Italy there, they decided that they were going to go out into the Mediterranean Ocean, Mediterranean Sea, about 100 miles to Crete. There's a place out there called Fair Havens, which was a small port, not very big. And they got out there, and it wasn't a great place to winter in the boat. And so they decided that they would try and go someplace else. And they got out, and it was fall, winter time, lots of storms, and they wound up shipwrecked on Miletus, which is actually Malta, which is off the coast of Sicily, which is the big island that's off the toe of the Italian boot. And so Paul's well on his way to Rome, but it was a journey. I'm going to pick up in verse 37 here. These grain ships from Alexandria were not tiny ships. We usually think of these things as not much bigger in some cases than sort of big rowboats, but this had 276 passengers and crew on it. And they gave people enough food to eat. These people had been fasting now for 14 days in a boat that looked like it was just going to be shipwrecked someplace, or they were all going to drown. And when they'd eaten enough, everybody was sort of feeling a little better. Then they threw the wheat out into the sea. And when it was day, they didn't know where they were, the land was, but they discovered a creek with a shore in which they were minded, if it were possible, they could thrust the ship. And so they took up the sea anchors, the ones that sort of kept them from being blown about totally by the wind. They committed themselves to the sea. They loosed the rudder bands. They hoisted the mainsail into the wind, and they let the wind blow the ship into shore. The boat ran aground. The front part of the ship ran aground and stuck fast, but the back part was actually smashed because of the violence of the waves in the storm. And the soldiers decided that it would be best to kill all the prisoners. Now, if the prisoners were killed by the soldiers, the soldiers were okay, just the prisoners were dead. But if the prisoners escaped, then not only were the prisoners gone, but the soldiers died, because the soldiers would be killed because they let the prisoners escape. But the centurion, who wanted to save Paul's life, said, no. We just let everybody swim for themselves and get to land. And some of them got to boards, and some of them on broken pieces of the ship. Anyway, they all escaped safe to land.